If anyone feels marginalised, that is discriminatory, that is a form of violence against that person.
As blokes, we might not always realise what's right and wrong, or what we're doing and how it affects women.
I can't lie, some girls are so accustomed to being catcalled.
If we're going to be perpetrating this harm, this violence, we should also be the ones who are coming up with the answers, the solutions to it.
We need to kind of unpick our own behaviours, look within before looking out.
I've never had to consider what I was wearing.
It shouldn't be normal, it should be something to stand up against.
So today we're going to talk about gender-based violence. First of all, why do you think it's important? Obviously we're four blokes. Why do you think it's important that blokes talk about it?
Statistically, men, we are the majority of the perpetrators. So if we're going to be perpetrating this harm and this violence, we should also be the ones who are coming up with the answers, the solutions to it. And I think, that has to start early on in childhood, and we'll all have had different experiences with our friends and at home with friends, possibly fathers, brothers, and the things that we saw and heard. But yeah, I think the onus is on us. We have the responsibility. We have to be accountable for that. It's not up to women to tell us what we should do. I really feel like we need to take on that responsibility.
Yeah, I can really relate to the accountability level. We all know what right and wrong is. And when we hear something, we need to make a stance on it. It is the only way we're going to progress forward is by accepting that is not right. What can we do to change that? So yeah, hugely, yeah.
I suppose it's all, we talk about what's right or wrong. Sometimes, as blokes, we might not always realise what's right and wrong, or what we're doing and how it affects women, because we've not experienced what it's like in terms of their life experiences. What would you say? How would you define gender-based violence?
So, violence can take many forms. Obviously, it's a spectrum. At one end, you have sexual assaults, rape, murder. At the other end, it's kind of misogyny and attitudes that are sexist, and that can just be in terms of for example, how men expect women to behave or dress or speak, or their role perhaps in the household. But I think even way before that, at school and before, I was thinking about it. I think even something like gender reveal parties, I find it interesting that people make such a big deal about whether or not they're going to be having a boy or girl, as if that matters more than the baby just being healthy, and the fact that in certain cultures it's preferable to have, male sons. I think it starts so early on that we're just conditioned. We're not even aware of it. We don't realize it until, someone maybe kind of points something out, or we're challenged on our views or attitudes. I don't think anyone thinks that they are misogynistic or sexist, but perhaps the way we behave, the language we use is.
Yeah, I mean that's completely it. We're very much part of the society we live in, and we adopt a lot of those behaviours. What would you say? How would you describe gender-based violence?
I think it's any discrimination against a gender. At the end of the day, it's as simple as that. Anything that is a form of a joke but it's not. It shouldn't be. This is what it is. It's got to be broad. It's got to be range. If anyone feels marginalised, that is discriminatory. That is a form of violence against that person. But I think a lot of the learned behaviours it's generational influence. My father did this, my grandfather did that, and that's how he approached talking to his wife, is talking to his sister. So for me, we need to kind of unpick our own behaviours, look within before looking out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was going to add to that, when you unpick your mind as well, why did I say this? Why did I go there? You go back, and you have to sometimes unlearn things. You have to go back and be like, nah, I shouldn't. I grew up doing this. This is where we are right now, innit? Let me start unpacking the new way, the new mindset, the right mindset to like show respect to the opposite gender, which is like, actually they have dignity, actually they have worth. You shouldn't, what you're saying, what you grew up doing, it's just gonna degrade them. And words have power as well.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's interesting what Pascal said about sometimes like when somebody's expecting, and certainly like I know from my experience and the community I grew up in, like, and I hope it's dying out, but there was always a sense of like, oh, hopefully it's a boy, and that's like, when you actually think about it, that's so mad. Like, somebody's having a baby, it's one of the greatest moments in life, and like you kind of already saying like it'll be in any way a disappointment if it's a girl.
yeah.
It's just it's bizarre, but it's such a common thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about centuries, millennia of these kind of traditions of patriarchy, and some cultures are still quite conservative in terms of expectations, and what it means to be a man and masculinity. And I think there's a real crisis around that. Like, so much has happened in recent times, the last few decades, and I think roles for men are very different to how they perhaps were. So what it means to be a husband or a father or a friend, and again, I think unfortunately, like, depending on kind of maybe how you were raised or how you were conditioned, a lot of men unfortunately just don't know how to express themselves. They don't have the language, and they're kind of disconnected from themselves and each other. And there's so much kind of shame and fear and guilt. And the fact that, a lot of us don't know how to be kind of open up and be vulnerable, because we perceive that, or we've been led to believe that that's a kind of a weakness, means that sometimes that kind of manifests in terms of kind of anger and then physical violence. So I think this is really good. Hopefully this is a good opportunity for us to like explore these topics and open up and share, our own opinions, our own experiences, and try and maybe address some of the causes of gender-based violence, as well as, coming up with some ideas for possible solutions as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, Richard, when you were defining what you felt gender-based violence was. You said any kind of gender-based violence towards any gender. Who do you think it affects more in terms of demographics?
I think it's widespread. I don't think it's particularly ageist. I think it can go from younger kind of adults, males, right the way through to the elderly. I think there's a consensus towards women that I don't really understand. For some reason, I question why I think certain ways sometimes. I think we're all guilty of thinking a certain way. And I think now is the time for men to kind of reflect on that mindset and think, right, before I open up and share my viewpoint, I need to kind of decide if that's right or wrong now. But yeah, I think we need to be targeting that younger male. So hopefully that kind of carries on as they get older. They can share that viewpoint with their children as they progress through life.
We're talking about how men should behave and how men should change. I think we've already come to the sort of a bit of a conclusion about who the perpetrators might be and who might be affected. It's interesting whenever I've seen videos talking about gender-based violence and when it's about women who are affected, because it's overwhelmingly women who are affected. A response you often get is what about men? But I suppose we've already kind of established the fact that it's quite often men, or it's very often men that are doing it to women.
Yeah, that's true. Like I rarely see a woman coming to a man and like slandering them or throwing a mad like accusation. Like I don't even know how to describe it. It's like just a mad slur. Like,
it's about where the power lies, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
So it's that thing of like if the power is with a certain demographic, what they do to the demographic that's got less power it's more harmful, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And it's more likely to happen.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you only have to look at kind of history and I guess, like I was trying to explain before, kind of these traditional gender norms and roles, and a lot of that has changed, you know, with, for example, more women going into the workplace, into education, and wanting to have, you know, a career and, you know, raise a family. But I think that, you know, the point that you were making, Rick, is that gender-based violence isn't necessarily men perpetrating violence towards women, right? So it can go both ways. I think when men feel maybe that something is being taken away from them, their power, that's when you get this kind of strong reaction where, I'll just speak for myself, I think, or from what I've experienced, when you don't know quite where you fit in or belong. And I think that causes a lot of kind of confusion and anxiety. And unfortunately, you know, people kind of lash out and express themselves in those kind of violent ways.
If we talk about gender-based violence and we try to define it, it would be good if we could sort of touch upon some examples of gender-based violence, particularly sort of the early stage examples. So could you give me some examples of where it can happen very early on in any interaction between men and women?
I'm just trying to retrace my own steps in terms of early life to kind of look at the early cases. I'm thinking catcalling, but that's probably way past that point. I'm looking at early stages. I suppose it's the role of the mother, isn't it, to be at home, to clean. I think you just accept that role as a male. I did, and just didn't think anything of it. My dad went to work, my sisters would go to school, and my mum would look after us all. So yeah, that's my early exposure. It's just my mum being quite a demoted role within the family, which I'd never had the choice. I just accepted it for what it was. So that was my early exposure. I don't know if anyone's got similar kind of experiences.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to speak to. Like, it starts very early on, even before birth. But like you say, in the home, gender roles: who cooks, who cleans, who works, who raises the kids, and how we value those as well. And then, you know, and then from there, it kind of escalates. It's a spectrum, right? To whether it's unwanted attention or touching or language. Any time that you treat someone differently to how you would like to be treated, and you think, consciously or not, that you have a right to treat them that way and expect something from them, you know, without their consent. And I think, you know, we'll probably get onto this as well, like the issue of like just boundaries, you know. I think, you know, perhaps we all have different understandings of boundaries and you know, what is appropriate and acceptable and how we feel safe. And I think that can be a very different experience based on your gender or your sexuality as well.
Yeah, I suppose it's that thing of how somebody behaves might seem harmless to them, but how that's received by somebody else because of their experiences, it can be completely different. I mean, even to the point of like walking down the street and it being late at night, and then a woman noticing that a man's nearby or walking behind her or something. Even that, like, to the man, it can feel like I'm doing nothing wrong, but to the woman, it can feel quite threatening. I mean, I suppose that's an important factor to consider, that it's not about being defensive and not thinking, well, I've not done anything wrong. Why are you talking about men? Like, I'm a man. What's all that about? It's more a case of trying to learn about what people find threatening and just being nice about it and just being aware of it and just being considerate, really, isn't it?
I was just going to say, sorry. I was going to say that I've never had to consider what I was wearing, you know, will this attract unwanted attention? Or I've never had to worry about my personal safety if I was alone at night on the street, that I may be attacked, you know. I just think, yeah, I've had completely different experiences, and I've not had to consider those things. How do I protect myself? Or if I wear this, will I have to deal with the consequences of that? Those are just thoughts that, fortunately for me, I don't have to like think about on a regular daily basis.
I think this is part of the problem, isn't it? Because we've never had to feel a certain way in any way. We had to kind of reflect on what we're wearing, how we're conducting ourselves. And I think, how do we kind of move past that? We need to kind of consciously kind of think how our behaviour is influencing other people. So I think for us, it's really important sort of be consciously aware of our own callings, I'd say.
Yeah, I believe that the key word here is perspective, because it's hard for boys, young boys especially, to put themselves in a young girl's shoes, where you can't understand their feelings, you can't understand what they've gone through. There's an encounter, you don't know what's going on in their mind, and when you say something to them, you don't know how many things you've just started. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy, but like they can just say one small thing, like, "Hey, yo, darling, you're right." But then it comes across like they can say it in a way sometimes, and even so, they've been conditioned from growing up to think, the way I said it, what's wrong with that? Girls usually, they laugh at that, they giggle, but this one here, she's acting different. Why is she like this as well? So yeah, it's like, rah. Then you don't understand that what you said, the way you said it, is kind of derogatory. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like kind of crazy. So
I suppose that's it, and you bang on. It's that idea of perspective, and it's that thing of like, okay, you've said that, and to you it's harmless, but you don't know how many times that's been said to her already in the day, and she's just trying to get on with her day, and she's encountered that already. It's interesting. I saw a while back there was a question, I think it was on TikTok, about it was a question addressed to women, and it was, what would you do if men didn't exist for 24 hours? Mm-hmm. And the responses to that kind of blew my mind, because it was, I'd go walking at night, I'd go running at night, I'd go walking without I'd go walking with my headphones on, because I wouldn't be worried about taking one off and making sure who's around me, and also things like I would wear what I want to a club, and it's those things where as blokes we just don't. It doesn't even factor in our thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. I think, like I was trying to say before, we all have women in our lives who we love and respect, that we know really well, but we may not have had these conversations with them. These can be difficult things to discuss. But I think that's, as well as us speaking today amongst ourselves as men, I think it's by having those sometimes difficult conversations with our mothers, our sisters, our wives, that we can really kind of get a better understanding and hopefully empathize with what it's like to be them and live as they do, which I think is a very different experience, and things that they have to think about that we just don't even have to think about, even when it comes to, I don't know, things like every month, their menstrual cycle and pregnancy and what that means for themselves, their lives, their bodies, work as well, maternity pay, all these issues that generally, like, I think I can like kind of understand like on an intellectual level, but if it doesn't really impact me personally in my life, I can kind of just let it slide a little bit and just say like, well, that doesn't really affect me, so I don't have a stake in that, so I don't really need to care about it as much.
I can agree with what you just said, because like before this whole thing, like this whole campaign came across, I was chatting to my sister about it, like, yo, I'm doing this thing, I kind of need some understanding, like, help me out, because I've never had this kind of conversation with her, and boom, she was telling me all these types of things that I have never even thought that she went through. But she literally started off, us, like, when I said like, right, you go through that, she was like, Daniel, you didn't know this, like, this happens to most girls, like, and girls that you know as well. I was thinking, right, her too. So I was like, right, that's crazy. Like, we don't know. Like there's just a connection, there's a barrier between it. Like, boys, girls, we don't know what's on that side, like what they go through in the daytime, even the nighttime as well. So
yeah. No, that's thing, and it's interesting, Richard. Like, we were talking before, and did you say you came on bus and then you walked here, and it was just a straight walk? Like, afterwards, presumably you'll be making the same journey, and as blokes, like we think, so what? Like you walk there, then you get the bus, and that's it. Whereas for a woman, it would be like, is that a safe way to walk? Is it well lit? It's kind of mad that, like, as blokes, like we won't even think twice about that kind of thing, would we?
It's not even a consideration, is it?
No.
It's just that's the way we walk home, and we're not going to contend with anything on the way. But yeah, I think men, we compartmentalize so well in terms of, like, well, we don't need to worry ourselves about that. And I think women, we need to have a better, deeper understanding. We're never going to truly understand each other, but having that awareness it's key for progressive reform, better. It's, but yeah, looking back on that, that statement in terms of walking back without even any provoking behaviour by anyone else, it's staggering, really. I've not even thought that myself.
No, well, that's the thing. I mean, sometimes I get so stuck in my own world, is that I'll be listening to my earphones and I'll be walking, and then I realise, like, 10 minutes later I've walked to where I was, and I've not even thought about where I was going. You're almost on autopilot, aren't you? Whereas that's not a consideration, that's not a luxury that women get.
Well, I was just going to speak to what you said, Rick. Like, you know, I don't carry a rape alarm. I know a lot of women who do. That's not something I've ever even thought about having to do. If I'm out at a bar or a club, I won't ask, like, a male friend to accompany me to the toilet because I think something might happen. I don't worry about being assaulted. And, you know, these are just things that you pick up, you see and you hear. And even just like, you know, many of my kind of female friends or women in my life, if one of them is catching the bus or train or taxi home, the other one will say, you know, make sure that you let me know when you've got home safely. You know, that's, none of my male friends or men in my life have ever said that. Give me a call or a text, you know, let me know you've got home safe. You know, it's just, you know, those are just like a few little examples, but they're just, I mean, the amount of time and energy that must occupy in your brain, you know, just worrying about what might be around every corner, you know, and if you say the wrong thing or look at someone the wrong way, you know, that, you know, say a man might take that as some kind of an invitation, you know, even just, you know, even if they're just being polite or friendly, you know, some men take that as an invitation to start flirting, you know, and actually maybe they're just going about their daily business on the way to work, shopping at the supermarket, you know, they're not trying to hook up with you.
It's interesting that you mentioned the supermarket and different scenarios. Like, where do you think gender-based violence happens? Do you think there's a specific situations or areas, or do you think it's just everywhere?
I think it can be applied to all settings. I think you've got the gym for a prime example. It can be a supermarket, just exchanges. And I think women are constantly mindful about when they go out, what are they going to encounter. And that shouldn't be a thing. They shouldn't be experiencing that on a daily basis.
And how much of a problem do you think, because we all live around the Greater Manchester area, how much of a problem do you think gender-based violence is in everyday life in this area?
It is a problem. I'm not too sure how big of a problem it is in places like the city centre. Like in my hood, I think I can't lie, some girls are so accustomed to, like, being catcalled, and it's kind of like, it's disheartening. It makes me sad because, like, that guy's being very rude. I'm walking down the road, I'm hearing that. Like, just kids on the other side of the road just screaming certain stuff, and I'm thinking, rah. At the same time, I only see that rarely, but at the same time, it's still a problem that we can't ignore. So
I suppose it's almost a case of, it's kind of sad that, like, women just factor it into the day.
Yeah, I think it's a society that we live in today is crazy because it's starting to turn into like a normal thing. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, it shouldn't be normal. This thing shouldn't be normal. It should be something that we should be actually proud, like, to stand up against. You're standing up against that thing. Like, why are you gonna feel scared? Why are you gonna feel about other people? They're gonna say, oh, why are you saying this and that? It's not that deep. Yeah. That's one of the things that people used to numb it down and took it away. It's not that deep. It is deep because, first of all, you're just disrespecting another woman. Like, that's crazy to me. Quite lie.
I was just going to speak to that as well. And I think, you know, what we're aware of, what we see is like the tip of the iceberg, right? I think a lot of it happens behind closed doors. And again, there's so much shame and guilt around it. And I think now with the internet, a lot of it happens online and you wouldn't necessarily know, but you know, the number of, you know, that are sent, you know, just again, unwanted attention, unsolicited. I mean, I'm 41, so I'm not like on the dating scene, on apps and stuff like that, but I hear stories from people who are, and the things they tell me, you know, the kind of the comments, the pictures, the videos, and again, like attitudes around dating, I think is really problematic. But yeah, I mean, you know, if you go out on a Friday or Saturday night in town, you know, bars and clubs, at the end of the night, you'll always see, you know, people coming out. There's usually some kind of argument or fight or something, or even inside the bar or the club on the dance floor. But I think that's just such a small part of, you know, kind of gender-based violence. Yeah, I think the true statistics are just, unfortunately, I think are a lot more shocking than that.
How often would you say that you notice it on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, daily, regularly. But again, that's, you know, my perception of it through my lens, you know. But the things that catch my attention are going to be very different, you know. And I think, I'm sure, you know, a lot of women and girls have probably developed techniques to minimize attention, for example, to not draw attention to themselves. And the whole thing of not wanting to cause a fuss, cause a scene, you know, because that can often like kind of escalate things and make it worse. But again, I can only base it on, you know, things I've read or heard about what really goes on, what happens online or at home. And I think, yeah, so you know, if you kind of, that's anecdotal, but if you then kind of extrapolate that, you know, across hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people that live in Greater Manchester, I think it's a far bigger kind of societal issue.
Yeah, but I mean, it's interesting. Like, I'll be honest, I don't always pick up on things because I can be a bit thick. But you like it's amazing once you see, or when somebody explains what they go through. It's like what you were saying about you will notice something, and then you'll think you shouldn't put up with that, and like. It's almost a case of like women will brush it off as if it just happens. It's not until you realize, or you're looking for it, that you realize how prevalent it is. We've actually got a really good video. It's a Is This Okay film, which kind of explores that and looks at a scenario where there's various situations where there is gender-based violence, and we can just watch that now and talk about it.
Hey, beautiful, gives a smile. That you look much prettier when you smile. Aye, don't ignore me. Come on, love. Think you're better than me, yeah? You're not even that fit.
What, you're not going to invite me now?
Yeah, you're asking for it dressed like that.
Are we off tonight? She definitely wants it.
Oh, he's sexy.
Do you think this is okay?